misuse of not only taxpayers' money, but of the young people who are in the National Guard, who've had to leave their families, their jobs, and their education for this deployment that is completely unnecessary. 4,000 troops, my understanding is most of their time has been spent in complete boredom, playing video games, and essentially waiting around because, again, the National Guard should have never been deployed in the first place. We did not ask for them. This is the federal seizure of power from a governor deploying the National Guard when the National Guard were not even needed. We had protests. At the end of the peaceful protest, there absolutely was some violence and some looting and vandalism. We brought that completely under control. The troops have never been involved in crowd control, never involved in the protest. They have been guarding a building. Our police department and our sheriff's department are the ones that brought the protests when it devolved into violence under control. We never needed the National Guard in the first place. This is a political stunt, a terrible misuse of taxpayers' dollars.
Have you ever wondered what it looks like when a politician's story completely falls apart on live television? Well, if not, first, LA Mayor Karen Bass wants you to believe the National Guard sent her to her city was so bored, when they came that they sat around playing video games. Then she claims that the riots that filled the streets of the city were just minor scuffles that her local police had totally under control. Does that really sound like the reality you and I saw? I don't think so, so stay with me. We're about to break down how a mayor's agenda-driven talking points get exposed by simple and very direct questions from a liberal journalist. It's a masterclass. You don't want to miss this. Let's go.
Mayor Karen Bass. Good morning, Madam Mayor.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay. Glad you can hear me. We are looking at immigration issues 6 months in. You have had such a firsthand experience out in LA, given the deployment of U.S. troops. The president ordered the early release of nearly half of the National Guard from LA. Have they departed yet? What are the remaining ones doing?
Well, I believe they've departed, but they were never needed in the first place. And the remaining ones are doing what they were doing all along, which is essentially protecting 2 federal buildings, one of which in Westwood, where there never has been a big protest against the immigration raids. This is just such an incredible misuse of not only taxpayers' money, but of the young people who are in the National Guard, who've had to leave their families, their jobs, and their education for this deployment that is completely unnecessary. 4,000 troops, my understanding is most of their time has been spent in complete boredom, playing video games, and essentially waiting around because, again, 4,000 deployed and about 200 actually used.
The White House, of course, argues they deployed them because there was interference with the operations of law enforcement in carrying out some of the roundups. There are still enforcement actions by ICE taking place. You have talked about your objections, as you described them, to masked men, unmarked cars, drawing guns, snatching people off the street. You filed a Freedom of Information request to, quote, know who these masked men are. Why, though, is their identity important to you? Do you plan to prosecute them?
Well, no, let me just explain. Because you have people who are literally walking down the street, sitting at bus stops, are individual vendors selling fruit on the street. These masked men pull up in unmarked cars and jump out of the cars with rifles and detain people. So for the average citizen, it looks like it's a violent kidnapping. So you should never have that. They don't identify themselves. And furthermore, to your previous guest, how on earth do they know that they're a threat when they're just chasing random people through parking lots, at Home Depots, going to car washes and rounding up people? It's difficult to get your car washed in Los Angeles now because most of the car washes, the employees won't come to work out of fear that a raid will.
And some of them fear that their families will be retaliated against, and that's why they are covering their faces, that they do wear markings for the agencies that they work with. How do you respond?
Well, first of all, let me just tell you that the masked men are not from Los Angeles. And so how their families could be retaliated against. And then what is that to say to local law enforcement, the Los Angeles Police Department, none of whom are ever masked, who always identify themselves and even hand someone a business card. So that makes absolutely no sense at all. And I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that the woman selling pineapples on the corner is going to attack an ICE agent. And then when he says that there's identification, the problem is many of these men are in plain clothes with vests on that say police. It looks like something that they could have gotten online. I think it's really important to point out the extreme nature of the randomness. And, you know, Holman has said, he's mentioned a number of criteria for why they stop people. One of the points of criteria is physical appearance. Los Angeles has 3.8 million people, and about 50% of our population is Latino. So I guess that means 50% of Los Angeles could be possible suspects in an immigration raid.
Well, Tom Homan has said physical description cannot be the sole factor for reasonable suspicion, but things like location, occupation, physical appearance add up, particularly if a person runs away or if there's a tattoo or something. You don't seem to believe that.
Location, sitting at a bus stop, walking down the street, selling fruit. No, I do dispute that, absolutely. And, you know, again, the National Guard should have never been deployed in the first place. We did not ask for them. This is the federal seizure of power from a governor, deploying the National Guard when the National Guard were not even needed. We had protests. At the end of the peaceful protest, there absolutely was some violence and some looting and vandalism. We brought that completely under control. The troops have never been involved in crowd control, never involved in the protest. They have been guarding a building. Our police department and our sheriff's department are the ones that brought the protests when it devolved into violence under control. We never needed the National Guard in the first place. This is a political stunt, a terrible misuse of taxpayers' dollars.
So right off the gate, the mayor dismisses the National Guard as simply never needed. And it's a very bold claim considering the chaos we all saw on the news. But then that's just all warm-up. I mean, what she says next is just ridiculous. So she describes federal law enforcement officers doing their jobs, and she calls them masked men in unmarked cars who snatch people off the street. And she makes it sound like a horror movie, I don't know, some apocalyptic scenario, but these are ICE agents enforcing federal laws that are on the books. It's truly amazing how her concern is for illegal immigrants on the one hand, while she shows absolutely zero concern for the officers who need to wear masks to protect their own families from being targeted by the very criminals they are trying to apprehend. And then she claims these agents don't even identify themselves, and luckily for us, we don't have to take her word for us, because the actual director of the ICE has stated clearly that they are identified on their vests. And it's another convenient detail the mayor has leaved out. And her go-to example is a poor woman selling pineapples on the corner. It's a very classic emotional trick. It's always used. Ignore the dangerous criminals and the gang members that ICE actually targets, and instead create the narrative that they are only going after harmless street vendors. It's dishonest, with all due respect, in my opinion. And finally, she twists the words of the former ICE director, claiming he said they target people based on physical appearance alone. And that's just false. He said it's one of the many factors they are using. So, like for example, having an MS-13 gang tattoo on your face, to most of us, that's called common sense.
But I want to ask you about fires, because we are now officially in fire season. It was just 6 months ago we saw those blazes in LA. You fired the then fire chief for, you said, a failure to prepare, but you still don't have a permanent fire chief in that role. Isn't that a problem? Are you prepared?
No, I don't think that's a problem at all. Our interim fire chief has 40 years of experience. In fact, he had just recently retired. I called him in out of retirement during the fires. He was doing the Emergency Operations Center. So he stepped in, didn't miss a beat by taking over the fire department, and we are prepared. We do know that it's fire season.
So is your plan to keep him in place? since you brought him out of retirement and put him in an interim basis?
No, I'm sorry. No, we're doing a national search, and he is certainly open to apply. But the nation's second largest city needs to make sure that we search the nation for the best talent. And I'm sure that there will be people in the department that apply, but we want to cast the net wide. We did the same type of search for our police chief.
So after misrepresenting riots and slandering federal officers, in my opinion, let's see how the mayor is handling the basic safety of a city. We all know California is a bit of a fire problem, so heading into the fire season without a permanent fire chief seems at least a little bit questionable. So the interviewer asks a very simple question, namely, isn't that a problem? Yeah, and she first says, no, I don't think it is. But in the very next sentence, she admits she's conducting a national search, quote, to fill the role. And it's like telling someone your house isn't on fire while keeping dialing 911. And she says they did the same kind of nationwide search for their police chief, and what was the result in the end? A lot of opinions actually say that he's not executing things, but rather here to manage feelings and uphold the sanctuary city policies that put everyone at risk in the very first place. And this tells you everything you need to know. These searches aren't about to find the most qualified person to protect the city. They're about finding the most politically suitable candidate according to many opinions. And in Los Angeles, it seems the safety of the citizens comes second to the political narrative.